Hey guys, for this week's stream, I was thinking of doing a little bit of art stuff. Take a little bit of break from the coding aspect of the engine. And one thing that I was always trying to use is Megascans. But one of the reasons that always held me back from trying to use them more is the fact that they do carry some pretty hefty weight, and if you're doing an open world game, you got to think about texture memory a little bit more, because you're gonna have to load pretty much everything, and you want to try and keep that down. So um, if you take a look at one asset, like for example, this is a Megascan asset. But as you can see, it has almost the same details as the Megascan asset itself, but it has a completely different texture applied to it. So, and this is actually just a 2K texture, and I've tried this with a 1K texture as well, and it actually worked pretty damn good. So, for today, I'm going to be using a set of tools, and amongst them it's going to be Substance Painter, Substance Designer, and of course the maps from Megascans. And actually, well, not the maps, but I'm going to bake my own maps using the high poly and the LOD1 mesh. Well, so the reason for that, and I'll show you why, is that depending on the texture, I have to rearrange some of the UVs on the Megascan asset. So, like I said, I'm going to be using a couple of different tools. You guys might not have those, but the processes are easily interchangeable using either xNormal, Photoshop, or Gimp. So hopefully I'm going to be doing okay at explaining how this works, and you'll be able to follow along. Okay. Again, this is my process of generating this detail map on the Cryengine documentation for generating one of those. I think it's called a uniform detail mapping. The result is slightly different, but I found out that at least for my usage, this works out pretty well. So let's get to it. First of all, I'm going to be looking at I'm going to be using one of these this asset in particular, because I definitely like it. It's got very interesting shapes. It's kind of got these hard corners, or like edges, whatever you want to call them, around here, and it definitely makes for an interesting shape. So, and I think it could be used in a variety of terrains. Alright, so let's get to it. I use Blender. I mean, if you use anything else, this should be just as it's easy for you as well. So first of all, let's see. I'm gonna copy the path from my directory so I don't have to search through all of these. So let's go, and I'm gonna be importing. I believe these are OBJs, so let's go ahead and import. I'm gonna be importing my LOD0, and I'm not going to worry about my high, because there's nothing that's going to be changed with that. So let's go ahead and import this one. And once it gets imported, at least for Blender, it's actually pretty big. So I'm going to leave it like that for now. I believe it's just that because none of them, I mean, not all of them behave the same way. I've imported a different asset, and it's actually the proper dimensions. Like this one, at least for me, is 180, 432, and I mean, look at these dimensions. These are not realistic. So, but I'm going to keep it like this. And first of all, well, like I said, what I'm going to do is actually rearrange these UVs a little bit. The advantage with a detail map is that you can fit multiple of those on this. So, I'm going to be creating a new texture here, and I'm going to be using a color grid. The reason I'm using that is, excuse me, that I'm going to be able to tell what directions all of these are going in. So for example, if you look at these ones, and if you think of rocks in general, they have a certain direction they go in. So I'm going to be, at least for this asset, if you take a look at it and you see it's got these, kind of hard lines. And I think if you look at the rock itself, you see like this is how kind of the wear, I guess, um, of the rock is going. So I'm going to try and use a texture that goes from top to bottom. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing here is I'm actually going to unwrap this again. So I'm just going to hit U and unwrap. So you're going to be ending up with something like this. And if you look at the letters, you see that they kind of follow the lines of our rock. So let me see if I can turn on Ambient Occlusion. Maybe it doesn't work for this so well. I was hoping that kind of, I guess, kind of get a little bit of idea for that, and not so much. But you can kind of tell that the lines of where the textures are gonna go, which is my lower res textures, are kind of following along with the rock. Well, so that's pretty much it that I have to do in here. So once I'm done with that, I'm gonna go ahead and give this an export. So I'm gonna be exporting this as an FBX. Let's try doing that. So my FBX export is just selected objects. There's nothing too fancy about that. Alright, so that's my path. I'm just going to call this for stream. And this is rock granite. And I'm going to be exporting here. Okay, so that's one step. Next step, this is where your favorite, map baker would come in. So for me, I'm going to be using Substance Painter. It's just that it's quick, and I got used to using it for my process. Alright, so let's create a new project, and we're gonna go into, let's see, where did we save that actually? So I'm gonna be looking into that again, Megascans, rock granite. So let's copy that, and here we go. Hey Oscar, thank you for stopping by. No worries. Okay, so I'm going to be importing my my granite, and this is LOD 0, so it's got quite a bit of, it doesn't have so much detail, so hence the detail map. So let's go ahead and bake our textures, and I'm going to be doing, let's do 2048 for just to see how it turns out. And for our needs, I'm only going to be needing ambient occlusion and normal. So let's pull in our high poly, and I believe it's this one. If we look at the size, yeah, that's got to be it. Let's give this a quick bake. So sometimes I'm running into some of these issues with some of the assets. I'm not sure if it's the sizing, or sometimes that could be it. So what I tend to do is in Blender, I'm also going to import the high poly. So this is going to take just a little bit longer. I just want to make sure that because whenever you bake them, you want them all to be at the same scale. So this is a pretty high poly asset. Yeah, because you can tell the normal and the ambient occlusion are just blank. So that's where some of our issues are coming in. Alright, so the thing got imported. Let's go ahead, and what I'll do is I'll move it to layer 2. So for this one, oh, this might be one of the issues. So that X and Y rotations are not applied. So let's take a look at this one. This one's into the same kind of thing. So what I'm going to do, since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and scale these down so that they're going to be usable in Engine as well. So I'm usually thinking this would be that. I did it at 1% of the original scale. So right now, I think from the scaling on the Megascan website, we're probably a little bit off. I mean, it shows this particular asset as being a few times bigger than a human. So once an engine, if you put it next to your character, you can see and kind of gauge how much bigger you want to make it. All right, so now we have both scale applied to both of these. All right, so I'm gonna have to re-export these. So just bear with me. So this is gonna be export FBX. So this is gonna be our high poly. So well, let's wait for that to export. This is going to be a probably just around the same size, if not bigger. I believe FBXs are slightly bigger than the LBJs. All right. Oh, actually, that was quicker than I expected. Alright, so we have that, and now let's export the low poly as well because we did adjust the size. So export FBX, and we have that one. Okay, so in Substance Painter for me, just gonna select the new rock here. And actually, I don't think it likes the changing in size, so I'm going to create a new project. And rock granite. There we have it. So let's try to bake in the textures again. So I'm going to do a 248 again, just only going to need normal and ambient occlusion. And high poly. Let's see how this bake goes this time. Oh, I see the normal. Let's see about the ambient occlusion if that comes through. And there's the ambient occlusion as well. So you can kind of see that we're getting the same details as before on the low poly, or LOD0 in this case, object. So let's go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to export the textures, and I'm just going to use the regular the document challenge normal plus AO. I only need the AO in the end, but I think, I'm not sure if you can probably edit this export feature to export just those. Alright, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to export it right here. So let's select that and export. I'm just going to leave it at 2K. You can bump that up to probably 4K if you'd like. Okay, so we have that, and there's our maps. Let's just use some large icons. So for our process, we're only going to need the AO and normal. Okay, and at the same time, we also have the assets, so we're going to be able to import that straight into the engine. Of course, you might want to add to these the LODs. That's for another session. It doesn't really relate to the detail texture itself. Okay, so with that said, let's go and I'll show you how to get that um, that detail map that we need. Okay, so for that, I'm using Substance Designer just because of this node setup and how quickly it is to, for example, um, to use a different. Let me bring in some of these here so I can show you a little bit better. So, because it's so easy to import a normal map and an ambient occlusion map, and finally, in the end, generate our detail map. So for that, let's quickly go through the nodes that I'm using for this example. So first of all, if you're new to Substance Designer, adding a node is just pressing space and then typing in the node that you're looking for. So I first start off with I was using this blend node to blend between two normals because I was hoping that I could add a little bit more, minor details in here. But that didn't really work out so well, so I kind of wasn't really using it anyways. So I'm going to bring the opacity down to 0. Okay. According to the documentation, you need you need to break up these maps in a certain way. So to do that, what I brought in is one of these RGBA split nodes. So if you type space and you start looking for RGBA split, and this is the node that I'm looking for. So that's going to split your channels into red, green, blue. So first of all, in our final detail map, the red channel is going to be taken up by the ambient occlusion. Then the green channel is taken up by the red channel of our normal. So after that, and hopefully this is not too confusing for you, and I'll post a link to the UDM, the detail mapping documentation in this video. So as I was saying, the red channel is our ambient occlusion. Then the green channel is our normal red channel. Our alpha is our normal green channel. And we're left with the blue channel for our detail map. And that is a little bit more, I want to say complicated, but to me it was a little weird because the documentation mentions that this is the gloss of your bake. So I'm not a very proficient modeler, so I wasn't entirely sure what that meant. What I did work out was with the documentation's help. First of all, they request that you use a levels to bring down the opacity, not the opacity, but I'm not entirely sure what this value is. You'll see it in Photoshop as well for the levels node. The brightness, I believe, bring that down to half. And in my case, I've used an invert node to get this kind of an effect, and then a levels node to kind of just make it a little darker. So this would be your gloss, and the gloss goes into the blue channel for your final export. Now I've used an HSL node here. I didn't really do anything. I was trying to do some tweaks. Hey Laura, welcome. So I was trying to do some tweaks for the final export of the detail map, but I ended up just leaving it at default. So like I said, all of these could be easily done in Gimp, Photoshop, but the easiest, at least for me, is in Substance Designer because it's non-destructive, or I mean they're all non-destructive, but for this one it's a lot easier to just import these maps. Like in my case, the ones that we just generated, I can just select them here and link the resources to my project, and there they are. So I just need to link the nodes here and to wherever else they're needed. So once I'm done with this, one other thing that I've done is based on my ambient occlusion. I wanted to create a blend mask, and that is because maybe I want to add some moss or some different surface, like maybe some dirt. You name it. And again, this one was very easily done. It's just taking the ambient occlusion and using an invert node. I believe it's Control I in Photoshop to invert the map, and then I'm just exporting it and I'm calling it blend. So with that said, we have these two maps. So we have the detail and the blend. You can right click on your graph here, and by the way, whenever you start up, one thing that I didn't mention, whenever you start up um, Substance Designer, you can just, so for example, I can do a new substance, and this is how it's gonna start up with. So I'm gonna select specular gloss, but you can select metallic roughness. We're not using any of those in here. So you just give it a name, and for example, rock granite 2. So when you create that, you'll notice that you have the export nodes, and we're only interested in 2 of those. They don't have to be, it doesn't have to be any of these. So you can choose either one and then give them the name. So whenever you do the export is going to be based off of, so if you right click, so let's go back into our original graph. So if you right click on this and export outputs as bitmaps, so you'll see that this is going to be the preview of how your rocks are going to be named. So you want something like that, just so that when you import them into Cryengine, they're already named that way. So let's go ahead and export our detail and blend, just like this one, and that. So I'm going to go into my stream here, select this folder, and make sure we have it as TIFF. Cryengine likes TIFFs better than anything else, because it has the channel information as well, so we need that. Okay, so I'm going to save all. Let's take a look at what we got. So we got our rock granite 1 detail and the rock granite 1 blend. Okay, so now let's jump to Cryengine. So within Cryengine, like I said, this was the example that I created. Let's move away from that a little bit, and let's go ahead and import our, it's going to be just this one, but let's go ahead and import it fresh. So I'm going to go to Tools and my Asset Browser. And in here, let's go into Objects, and let's see, where do we want to keep that? Natural, Rocks, and let's create a folder here, call it Megascans stream, so just so that I know about it. Okay, so back into our, wherever we export the XPX, what I'm going to do is, actually I don't want to open that with Paint. So I'm just going to import it into here. I'm just going to drag and drop it. So we have our material that got created and our mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag the mesh into the level. There we go. So like I said, this I believe is 4 meters high. So from what I remember as far as the sizing from Megascans, I think these are slightly bigger than that, maybe a couple of times bigger, but I'm gonna leave it like this for now. So let's jump into the material and let's see how to get that. So I'm just gonna get properties from selection, and there's our material. There's nothing in there at the moment. So we need to import our maps. So again, into our asset browser, since we have it right here, let's grab our blend and our detail. So I'm just going to bring that in here. So those are getting imported. There's an import asset message right here. So let's see, I believe my export from Substance Designer was 4K, so that's why it's taking a little longer. Even though I guess The detail of the map itself was just 2K, but that was my mistake. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and add some textures to this. So I'm going to go and look for my diffuse, and let's see. So for diffuse, I'm just going to go into I've actually imported a few rocks, rock textures from textures.com. I have a, everybody can get a free account on there, and you can get some pretty nice textures. So I believe one of the ones that I was using was this Rock Desert 1 diff. So I'm going to apply that, and you can see the reason why I mentioned that you might want to have this directionality to it. So there's my diffuse, and let's get the normal, and I believe it's this one here. Okay. And one of the things that we want to do, especially with whenever you have a lower res texture, and like I said, I've tried this with 1K, and they actually turn out pretty good. You want to tile this up. So I'm going to tile this to maybe, I'm going to start with 4. So tile it 4 times. That looks pretty good. All right. But what that means is whenever you plug in your detail, you're going to have to tile this down because this applies to the mesh. So I'm going to do, let's leave it at 1, and let's open up our details. So our detail is going to be an objects, natural, and where did we put it? Rocks, Megascan, stream, and detail here. There's nothing happening yet because we need to turn on this shader. So we have detail mapping right here. So as you can see, there's nothing too exciting going on, right? Because we didn't really tile it properly. So let's go ahead and set this tiling. If you remember, we had this tiled to 4. So this one's going to have to be 25. So 1 divided by 4. Alright, so let me turn on this sun direction here a little bit. So now you can see that some of those details from our bake, they're coming through much nicer. But you can always adjust this to get even more of that detail in there. You start off with this, but then you can bring it up some more. And some of the other options that this gives you is to adjust the diffuse scale. I usually like to leave this at 0, depending of course on the export. So for me this works best. Okay, and one thing that I need to do is, since this uses in Cryengine is using SVO-TI, that global illumination feature, I'm just gonna quickly update the geometry so this gets included as well. Hopefully we'll get a little bit better lighting on it. Let's see, how do we get a better, yeah, I think that might be best right there. Okay, and the last map that I wanted to add is that blend map. So let's turn on blend layer, and let's select our blending map. So there's our blending map here. And one thing that you need to do about this one as well is adjust the tiling of it. So this one has to be at 0.25. So you'll notice that we have these little white areas, and they can, depending on your fall off and your blend factor, they can get pretty big. I mean, or cover the entire map. Okay, so for me, what I used was I used some moss. So let's take a look and see if we can find some generic, I believe, and we have moss here. And one of the ones that I was using is this one. So there's the moss, and let's add the bump map for that moss. And I believe it might be this one. Yeah, there we go. And this one you can always tile. I think it's already tiled. Like if you bring the tiling down, you'll notice that you get a bigger looking moss in there, or whatever. So I think I'm gonna leave it at 4. I think that's a pretty good good point. So let's see if we can adjust this a little bit. That's kind of too much, but I think that gives you a good idea of the coverage of, be it moss or dirt, that you can have on this. One thing that I wanted to do is, like I said, scale this up a little bit. I mean, I think, like I said, it was calling for a bit bigger, and I think comparing to the player, I think this is where it was at. Okay, and one thing that I want to do is, at least with Cryengine, if you type into the console SVO debug 6, you'll notice which one of the areas get this dynamic lighting applied. So right now, since we just scaled it and we didn't regenerate or update the geometry, so I'm just going to go ahead and update the geometry for this. And now you see that the entire mesh is voxelized, because that's what the technology used is, it's voxels. So then typing in SVO debug again and setting it to 0, it's gonna remove those debug information. Okay, so I believe, so currently this level is using an environment probe, so I think I might need to make it slightly bigger, just so that it covers this one as well. I think it only extends up to this. So let's turn this up. Currently, and there we go. So I think that might be okay for now. So all in all, that is pretty much it for this process. Now it's taken probably a little bit longer to explain it, but now you have a 2K. I mean, at least for this asset, you only have a detail map that is at 2K instead of, for example, for this particular asset, we had this albedo that was already 10 megabytes, and I'm not sure if TIFFs would optimize that any more or make it any smaller, but you have that, and then you have the normal, which is another 20 megs, and of course the problem with the diffuse is that it doesn't give you too much flexibility, so you'll see this, it might become repetitive to see this asset every so often. So now we have, you can use different maps for this. For example, if I was to change this, so let's go ahead and see if I can find another one. I think I was playing around with this one. This one looked pretty good as well. So this, and this is a 1K map. So this is the result that you're getting with a 1K map, which, I mean, it's pretty old. I mean, if you get up close, you'll notice the 1K. But you can always bump up the tiling to say maybe this to be 8, and then of course you need to adjust your tiling for your detail to be 0.125 and 0.125, and as well as for your mask. So again, 0.125 here. So now, getting up close, you'll see that it looks quite a little bit better. And let's try and adjust blending a little bit, just so that it gives it that softer transition, just like that. So, so there you go. That was pretty much it. Like I said, it wasn't anything too complicated. Oscar, thank you so much for stopping by. Yeah, you have a nice day too. Okay, so so yeah, that is it. Thank you guys so much for checking this out, and hopefully it was useful to you. If you have any questions, just feel free to drop them into the comments. All right, thanks again, you guys, and have a great week. Bye.